The Masked Carnival. The streets of Venice shimmered under a pale autumn sun, the canals reflecting the ornate masks and elaborate costumes of the carnival's attendees. Amid the swirling colors and laughter, Elena moved cautiously, her eyes scanning the crowd with a mixture of excitement and unease. She had never seen the carnival so alive, yet beneath the festive gaiety lingered a subtle, almost imperceptible tension, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting for something unseen. Every laugh seemed edged with a shadow, every gesture carrying a hint of menace. She clutched the edge of her coat tightly, feeling an inexplicable chill despite the crisp daylight. Her attention was drawn to a small, hidden alley where a peculiar stall stood. The vendor was an elderly man, hunched and silent, his eyes glinting like dark coins beneath the brim of his hat. Rows of masks were displayed, but one in particular seemed to call to her, delicate yet unsettling, with painted eyes that seemed almost alive, and a mouth curved in a knowing smile. Elena felt an urge she could not explain, as if the mask had reached out to her through some invisible thread. She approached hesitantly, the vendor's eyes following every movement, and when she touched the mask, a shiver ran through her, leaving goosebumps on her arms. "You should take care with that one," the vendor said quietly, his voice almost drowned by the carnival's distant music. "Some masks do not simply adorn the face, they possess it." Elena laughed nervously, brushing off the warning as an eccentricity of an old man. Yet the unease lingered, coiling in her stomach like a living thing. She purchased the mask, feeling a strange weight in her bag, as if it contained more than just porcelain and paint. As she walked back into the crowd, she noticed subtle changes. The music seemed sharper, the shadows longer, and the air thicker with a tension that pressed against her chest. By evening, the canals darkened, reflecting lanterns that flickered like candlelight against the rippling water. Elena donned the mask for the first time, intrigued by the thrill of anonymity and transformation. At first, it was exhilarating, the laughter of strangers, the swirl of colors, the freedom to move unseen. But soon, a disquieting sensation crept over her. The mask seemed to adjust itself on her face, settling too comfortably, almost as if it were fusing with her skin. She reached to remove it, but her fingers met resistance. The mask had become unnaturally tight. A faint, cold whisper brushed against her ear, carrying words she could barely understand. "Welcome! You belong!" Panic began to creep in as she tugged harder, but the mask would not yield. She turned toward the carnival, searching for the vendor or any sign of help, but the street seemed subtly altered, familiar pathways twisted into unfamiliar corridors, and faces she had recognized moments ago now bore cold, unreadable expressions. The crowd had thinned unnaturally, leaving an unsettling silence punctuated by distant, distorted laughter. Elena's heart pounded as she realized she was no longer part of a festival. She had entered something else entirely, an undercurrent of Venice that only revealed itself to those marked by the mask. Her reflection in a nearby canal startled her. The eyes painted on the mask gleamed unervingly, staring back with a life of their own. A sudden gust of wind swept through the alleyways, carrying the scent of candle wax and damp stone. The carnival's music became warped, a haunting melody echoing as if from far away, distant yet close enough to reverberate inside her skull. The whispers grew louder, threading through her thoughts, suggesting shapes and movements in the darkness that were never there before. Elena tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. It was as if the mask had taken her voice, leaving only the heartbeat of her panic and the eerie awareness that she was being watched, not by strangers, but by the mask itself. Her footsteps faltered as she moved toward a square that she could have sworn had been empty moments ago, only to find figures masked in the same disturbing design, standing silently, waiting. Elena's legs moved mechanically, carrying her through the labyrinthine streets as the figures in matching masks remained silent, their presence suffocating. The carnival lights flickered overhead, casting fractured reflections in the water, and each ripple seemed to distort reality, elongating shadows, twisting shapes into grotesque parodies of human form. Her breaths came shallow and rapid. Each inhalation carried the metallic tang of fear, each exhalation a prayer for escape. The mask on her face pulsed faintly, warm yet clammy, and with each passing second, its grip seemed more intimate, embedding itself deeper into her consciousness. It was no longer just an object. It was a sentient observer, aware of her thoughts, her desires, even her deepest anxieties. She reached a narrow bridge spanning a quiet canal. The reflections in the water had multiplied, hundreds of her own masked faces staring back, mouths frozen in silent screams, eyes alight with unspoken warnings. Elena felt an invisible force pushing her forward, urging her into the square beyond, where the masked figures had gathered in a semicircle. She wanted to turn back, but the city had subtly shifted. Alleys she had used moments ago now looped impossibly, closing paths she had assumed were familiar. Panic surged, a wave she could not resist, as the whispers from the mask became voices, coherent yet alien. "You are ready! Join the dance!" The figures raised their arms simultaneously, and a low hum filled the square, vibrating through Elena's bones. Each masked silhouette seemed to shimmer and ripple, merging slightly with the others as though part of a single entity. She realized with growing horror that the carnival was not a festival of masks, but a congregation of something older, something that fed on participation, on consent, even if coerced by fear. One figure stepped forward, extending a hand. Its painted eyes glimmered with unnatural light. Elena felt a magnetic pull, not entirely physical but rooted in some deeper, psychic plane. Her resistance weakened. Her will, her individuality, threatened to dissolve into the collective intent of the masked assembly. A sudden movement drew her attention. A small girl in the crowd, face exposed, pale and wide-eyed, seemed entirely aware of Elena. The child mouthed words silently, lips moving in a desperate warning, "Don't let it take you!" Before Elena could react, the girl vanished into the crowd as if swallowed by the shadows themselves. The mask pulsed against her skin, tightening imperceptibly, and Elena felt an eerie warmth spreading from her cheeks to her temples. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears, each one in sync with the rhythmic swaying of the figures around her. The air became viscous, the music warping into a hypnotic cadence that wrapped around her thoughts, blurring the line between reality and the carnival's orchestrated hallucination. Desperation compelled her to act. Elena ducked behind a statue, pressing herself against cold stone, willing herself to breathe silently. The masked figures advanced, but not in a straight line. They flowed, gliding as if carried by currents unseen, anticipating her every move. The whispers grew frantic, now a chorus echoing her own fears, describing every secret she had tried to bury, moments of shame, guilt, and desire. It was an intimate invasion, more terrifying than any physical threat. Elena realized that the mask had already begun its work. It was not merely a curse but a vessel, a conduit that could dissolve identity and replace it with its own design. Each pulse, each breath, seemed to bind her closer to the carnival's will. A small alley offered a sliver of hope. Elena sprinted, the cobblestones slick beneath her feet, the sounds of pursuit blending with the warped carnival music. Shadows stretched unnaturally, wrapping around corners before she could reach them, as if the city itself conspired with the mask to contain her. The wind carried faint laughter, echoing from every direction, teasing and taunting. And then, at the alley's end, she glimpsed a doorway, a dark, narrow passage that seemed to lead somewhere unknown, but possibly toward freedom. With no other choice, she plunged forward, feeling the mask pulse stronger than ever, whispering in her mind, "The dance is not yet over." Elena stumbled through the narrow passageway, the shadows seeming to curl and stretch with a life of their own, chasing her every hesitant step. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something fouler she could not name, a mixture of decay, candle wax, and the faint metallic tang of blood. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears, each one amplified, making her dizzy with terror. Behind her, the distorted carnival music persisted, twisted now into a low, insistent pulse that seemed to command the walls themselves. The mask clung to her face as if fused with her skin, cold yet burning with a presence that insinuated itself into her thoughts. It whispered promises of revelry, of freedom, of identity merged with a greater, inescapable purpose. The passage widened into a hidden courtyard, one Elena had not noticed before. Lanterns flickered in impossible positions, casting shifting patterns of light that revealed masked figures frozen in silent tableaus. Their faces were identical to hers, yet each mask exuded subtle differences, a crooked smile here, a glint of malevolence there. The air was thick with anticipation, vibrating with the collective awareness of the assembly. Elena felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes pressing against her, measuring, evaluating, choosing. She realized that this was not simply a festival, nor a game, it was a selection, and she had already been marked. Each pulse of the mask against her skin resonated with the heartbeat of the courtyard, syncing her own fear with the rhythm of the hidden ritual. A figure approached, taller than the rest, moving with a grace that seemed unnatural. Its mask gleamed, painted with intricate designs that twisted subtly under the lantern light, forming patterns that seemed to crawl across its surface. Elena froze, unable to tear her gaze away. The figure extended a hand, gloved and steady, the gesture both inviting and threatening. Her mind screamed to flee, yet every instinct, every rational thought was dulled by the mask and the oppressive force of the gathering. The whispers in her head formed into words, coherent yet alien. To resist is futile. To join is to belong. The courtyard seemed to pulse with her hesitation, the figures swaying imperceptibly, a tide of anticipation that threatened to overwhelm her. Suddenly, a mirror set into the wall caught her eye. She stepped closer, compelled against her will. In its reflection, she did not see herself. Instead, she saw a version of Elena with hollow eyes, her movements mirrored but delayed, her expression twisted into something unfamiliar and cruel. The reflection reached toward her with a silent scream, and Elena recoiled, stumbling backward into the courtyard. The taller figure loomed, shadows from the lanterns forming tentacle-like shapes that reached toward her, connecting the reflections with the real, merging the two realities into one unnerving whole. Panic surged as she realized the mask was now more than an object. It was a bridge between her identity and this collective consciousness, and she could feel herself being pulled toward its fold. Elena tried to shout, but only a strangled noise emerged. The courtyard seemed to close in, the figures swaying and merging like liquid darkness, surrounding her in a circle of silent intent. Whispers became a chorus, repeating her name, recounting every secret she had ever hidden, every fear she had buried. The mask tightened further, constricting her senses, binding her will to the will of the gathering. Her arms moved against her desire, drawn to the central figure as if by strings she could not see. And then, as if acknowledging her struggle, the figure tilted its head, and the chorus fell silent for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. The stillness was more terrifying than the music, more suffocating than the shadows. From the corner of her eye, Elena glimpsed movement, a fleeting shadow darting behind a pillar. She realized it was not entirely alone. Someone or something might still be resisting the collective will. That glimmer of hope spurred her, pushing her forward, though every step felt heavier, as if the air itself conspired against her. The mask whispered again, softer now, seductive, "Do not fight. You belong with us." And in that moment, she understood the truth. The carnival did not merely trap the body. It consumed the soul, folding individuality into a vast, unyielding unity. Her breath caught as she prepared for a final, desperate act, hoping that some spark of self could survive the embrace of the masked assembly. Elena's desperation reached a crescendo as she scanned the courtyard for any escape, any flaw in the perfection of the masked figure's formation. The lanterns above flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that writhed across the cobblestones like living serpents. The taller figure advanced, its presence radiating authority, as the surrounding masks seemed to pulse with anticipation, moving in harmony with its silent command. Elena felt the mask on her face tightening almost imperceptibly, drawing her attention inward, whispering her fears and insecurities in a language only she could hear. Each pulse of the porcelain against her skin was synchronized with the rhythm of the courtyard, forcing her to confront memories she had buried, failures, betrayals, and regrets she had never dared to face. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind swept through the square, scattering fallen confetti like blood droplets across the stones. Elena's gaze fell upon a canal that had not been there moments ago, its water reflecting impossible shapes, twisted faces of past victims who had succumbed to the carnival's grasp. The whispers intensified, forming a symphony of voices she knew intimately, old friends, strangers, and even imagined figures, each calling her name, each urging her to surrender. The mask seemed to pulse in response, its painted eyes glinting malevolently, almost alive, and Elena realized with mounting horror that it was no longer just a vessel. It had become a partner in some malevolent ritual, feeding off her fear, shaping her perception, and guiding her toward submission. A sudden movement drew her attention. A masked figure had separated from the assembly, approaching with deliberate slowness. Its steps were synchronized with the distorted music that emanated from unseen speakers, each note a tendril coiling around Elena's mind. The figure stopped before her, and without a word, placed a gloved hand over the side of her face, forcing her to meet the eyes of the mask that now seemed fused with her own reflection in the canal. She saw herself, not as she was, but as the carnival envisioned her, hollowed, compliant, and yet eerily radiant, a vessel for the crowd's collective will. Panic surged, her pulse quickened, yet she could not look away. The whispers became commands. Step forward. Join the dance. There is no turning back. Elena tore at the mask, her fingers clawing at porcelain and straps, but it resisted as if alive, as if woven into her very flesh. The courtyard shifted subtly, walls stretching, corners folding, forcing her toward the center of the square. Every masked figure aligned with unnerving precision, guiding her steps, enclosing her in a rhythm that was both hypnotic and torturous. She stumbled, nearly falling into the canal, and glimpsed a reflection again. This time, it smiled at her, perfectly in sync with the mask, a cruel mockery of the self she had once known. The whispers became a chant, building to a crescendo that reverberated through her skull, drowning all thought, all resistance. Then, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. A figure, masked differently, darker, almost invisible in the shadows, gestured toward a narrow alley barely noticeable behind a collapsed arch. Instinct overrode terror. Elena lunged, pushing past the grip of the mask, tearing against the porcelain that now burned against her skin. The courtyard seemed to resist, the figure's shadows stretching like fingers to drag her back, but she forced herself forward, feet pounding cobblestones slick with rain and confetti. The wind howled, the whispers screamed, yet in that alley, a fleeting promise of freedom shimmered, a fragile escape through the shifting, malevolent carnival. Elena's mind raced. If she could just reach that alley, if she could break the rhythm, maybe, just maybe, she could reclaim herself before the mask and the carnival consumed her entirely. The taller figure advanced once more, but now there was hesitation in its movements, as if the carnival itself acknowledged her will, a flicker of uncertainty in the synchronized menace surrounding her. The mask whispered one final, chilling phrase, "You cannot escape what already belongs." Elena sprinted down the narrow alley, each step echoing in the confined space, the whispers of the carnival now a deafening roar in her mind. The mask pulsed relentlessly, its warmth searing through her skin, and she could feel it reaching deeper, probing her thoughts, bending her will. The shadows of the courtyard stretched and twisted behind her, trying to coil around her legs, but she pushed forward, fueled by raw desperation. The distant hum of the distorted carnival music lingered like a curse, wrapping itself around her senses, blending reality and illusion until she could no longer distinguish one from the other. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but the alley opened into an unexpected square bathed in cold moonlight, untouched by the artificial glow and chaos of the carnival. There, standing alone, was the dark figure she had glimpsed earlier, the one whose mask differed from all the others. Its presence was commanding, yet strangely reassuring, as if it held a fragment of sanity in a world that had lost all logic. Elena staggered to it, collapsing to her knees, gasping for air, the mask on her face still insistent, still alive. The figure extended a hand, silent and patient, and Elena, trembling, reached for it. As their fingers met, she felt a sudden surge, a jolt of clarity breaking through the oppressive fog of fear. The mask resisted, tightening for a heartbeat, then released, falling to the cobblestones with a hollow clatter. She gasped, free for the first time in what felt like an eternity, yet the eyes of the dark figure bore into hers with a warning, "The carnival leaves marks on those who escape. Remember, it waits." Even as the mask lay inert, the carnival's influence lingered, a subtle pressure at the back of her mind. Elena realized the city around her was no longer the same. Streets warped subtly, familiar paths now led to strange, impossible corners, and the echoes of whispered names followed her. The distant lanterns of the carnival flickered in alleyways she had never seen before, a reminder that escape was temporary, that the mask and its assembly had not relinquished their hold entirely. Elena's chest heaved, and she understood that survival meant vigilance, that the carnival's reach extended beyond physical boundaries. She could flee the square, but the memory, the psychological imprint, would forever link her to the masked assembly. Slowly, she rose, the dark figure receding into the shadows, disappearing like smoke. Elena's steps were deliberate now, careful, aware of every movement and every sound. She avoided the reflections in windows and puddles, knowing that even a glance could show the carnival's twisted simulacra waiting for her surrender. Every alley, every corner became a test, and with each passing moment she fought to retain her identity, to anchor herself in the reality she once knew. The mask, though discarded, had left a faint warmth, a pulse that reminded her of the assembly's lingering presence. She shivered, aware that even freedom was fragile, that the carnival's influence might return when least expected. Finally, Elena reached the outskirts of the city, where the fog thinned and the streets felt familiar once more. She paused, looking back toward the distant flicker of lights, toward the invisible music that haunted her ears. The mask had failed to claim her fully, but the experience had altered her irrevocably. In the quiet night, she whispered to herself, a vow and a warning intertwined, "I will never forget." and I will never return. Yet, as the wind shifted and the shadows lengthened, a faint, familiar pulse brushed her cheek, subtle, insistent, a reminder that the carnival was patient, eternal, and its dance never truly ended. The city slept, but Elena knew better. Somewhere, just beyond the reach of her vision, the masked figures waited, weaving their silent choreography, anticipating the moment when another step, another choice, might bring them a new participant. And she, though free for now, carried within her the echo of their rhythm, the memory of their chorus, and the unshakable truth: some masks are not meant to be removed.